law, you must seek to cultivate command of language. Words are the lawyer's tools of trade. Professor Prasananshu will be speaking on the topic Law, Language and Literature in the context of legal education and profession. The chair for the session is Dr. Tanya Mende. The session and the talk would be open to questions after the remarks of the chair. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic today to our distinguished guest, Professor Prasananshu.
Thank you very much. It has been a wonderful session. Even the inaugural was so full of wisdom. Before I say something, may I just request that as many people as can have the cameras on, please keep the cameras on. I am here basically to talk to the students and faculty. So talk means we can see someone. If there is any question, just please raise your hand. I don't have a structured or planned talk, but I would just like to share my experiences, my perspective. I hope it turns out to be meaningful for some of you at least. And before that, let me thank everyone who has made this event a success. Let me start with Dr. Navleen Multani, Dr. Tanya Mandir, and I also would like to acknowledge all the students, IT department, and it is a pleasure to share the platform with Ms. Tanima Vijay Bandra. A very special feeling of honor fills me when I see that Professor Nibir Ghosh is there, a senior person like him is there. And finally, my friend Dr. N.K. Vats is missing, but I remember him. And Professor Vajpayee, I will just have to say a few words for you. One is the Sanskrit saying, Vidya Dadati Vinayam. So the kind words you had for me, I think an outcome of that. The meaning of Vidya Dadati Vinayam is learning gives you politeness. So I don't think that I deserve as much praise as he showered upon me. The effects of his taking over the reins of your university are visible already, and I am very happy because he has given due importance to things which are usually ignored in a professional university. And I think that is a very good beginning, a very good indication. And I also remember, Professor Vajpayee will also remember that I made the subject of one writ petition this matter, that how it was a big writ petition. Many of you might have access to it. I drafted most of it. So I think it can also act as a piece of reading for many law schools, especially the sections. That's a good idea, which just struck me. Perhaps I can take the excerpts. It talks about multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and approach, a holistic approach, which is in consonance with the approach of our national education policy, or new education policy as we call it. That is the vision that we have for education these days. But I think that is something eternal. We have to understand, and there are so many things, so many thoughts are flooding me that perhaps I may leave something in between, jump to another thought, so you can bring me back. Like whatever Professor Vajpayee said today, I think that was complete in itself, and I will only try to elaborate or add to some of the things. Even if I just remark on what he said, I think that will take the whole time. He mentioned about Tolstoy, Kafka, Tagore, and many famous jurists Justice Krishna Iyer. He also talked about Indian writers, Munshi Premchand, Sri Lal Shukla, and many more things. So that must give a perspective to the students of law and my colleagues who have not that much exposure to literature and language. See, there are two things. The topic that has been given to me is law, language, and literature in the context of legal education and profession. And also, the overall theme is exploring words and worlds. This is a very ancient theme that is something like Shabd Brahm. And as Madam also mentioned, in John 1:1 in the Bible, it is said in the beginning there was nothing but the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is the international edition of the New Testament. So, that thing is reflected in Matsya Purana also, and the concept of Shabd Brahm is there. So word and world, they are very closely integrated, no doubt. And we can philosophically argue, we can philosophically explore whether they are the same or the different things. Because what we perceive, that is in words. Our whole perception or of the world is codified in language. Whatever we do, practically everything that human beings do is mediated by language. So law is no exception to that. You can think of any field of activity, any profession, but specifically it has been said, like Gibbons has said, law is language. I might have slightly changed the expression, but that is true, partly true. I won't say that it is the absolute truth, but it is a very important perspective. And if you look at it from one direction, that is absolute truth. That is what Ekantvadi Drishtikon is, one-sided perspective is. But if we take the Anekantvadi perspective of looking at things from many different directions, then it is one of the truths. That is what we would say. Why law is language? Because why he said this, let me slightly elaborate this. One is, see, all the laws are coded in language. They are written in language. In good old days, it was oral tradition. Laws were oral. Now we are writing them down. But whether we are writing or we are speaking, it is something to do with language. It is very important to trace the history of language and legal language within that, which is a sub part of it. Peter Tiersma has written a wonderful piece on that. Excuse me. So law and language are inseparables. They are inseparable to the degree that Gibbons called it law is language. Like whatever we do in our profession, in the practice of law, starting from the client interview to examination in chief, to cross-examination, to drafting, pleading, to judging, to judgment writing, to the defense speech, memorials, drafts, whatever it is, everything is in language. And if we don't have a command over language, we cannot expect to have command over the profession of law. If you look at all the great lawyers, Professor Vajpayee mentioned several of them, Justice Krishna Iyer, for example, one of the greatest jurists. In the petition I just mentioned, there was a debate on the issue of jurist also. Who is a jurist? Because it is a much violated, much misused term. It is just a fashionable word for many people. Dictionaries also talk very little about it. But I think instinctively we know what is a jurist, who gives a new direction to the thinking of law. And that person may or may not even be an LLB. Some of the greatest lawyers in history, like uh, like Cicero, they um, uh, if you look at the defense speeches or like Pro Archias was delivered 2500 years ago, uh, you would see uh, they didn't attend any law school. Rather, the concept of law was perhaps not there. I recommend, and perhaps you already have it in your syllabus. It is there in the recommendations of the Bar Council of India. Defense speeches should be there. Pro Amerino is there, but the best one is Pro Archaea, in defense of Archaeas. Let me just give a curtain raiser on that speech, defense speech, and on this author, Cicero. He was not the author because perhaps he never wrote it. He just delivered a speech. But it is so well structured that for 2500 years, it is across the world a matter of study in the classes of literature, number one. And number two, law schools have also not ignored it. We are lucky that in India, several law schools are taking it up now. But what is the significance of this speech? It was a speech in defense of Archias, Cicero's teacher. If you want to call him a teacher, that is fine, but a tutor, actually a tutor. And he was a Syrian poet. That's interesting, but because of the Roman Empire, people were moving. From Syria, he went to Rome. And there, a very modern, very surprising, astonishing matter was what he saw himself embroiled in. I wonder if I would like to see if someone can guess what was the matter. The matter was of citizenship. This sounds to be very modern, but even 2500 years ago, such things were happening. And Cicero, out of gratitude for his teacher, as a professional, defended him. And what he said is called a defense speech, like what advocates do in the court. And this speech became a part of literature. So language, literature, law, you are just seeing the transition. They are all interconnected. And the command over language of Cicero is wonderful. Command over language is not only language is at several levels. Language is not just about words. Language is organized at many, many levels. The first level may be morphology, the words, phonetics, syntax, semantics. But what we are talking of is also the level of discourse. Discourse is like whatever I am saying, it's oral discourse. And if I written it down or if I write it down, that will become a written discourse. So the command over language, first of all, it starts with words because words are the tools of a language. And if you are a craftsperson of language, then it is very important that your tools are sharp and you have full command over them. You must have seen, it was very frequent in my childhood. There used to be flute sellers who used to go around and sell their flutes. They used to have very simple flutes made up of bamboo, which looked like very simple thing, handmade things. And they were not professional things. They costed maybe 10 rupees. Even now you will get them. But when they played, it appeared that it was the most wonderful instrument in the world. It was better than professional instruments or if I play a flute, which is even a professional flute, perhaps I won't be able to, and I don't know how to play a flute. So those people with something that costs almost nothing can create wonderful music. The same applies with words. Number one, your command over words must be there. And if you are able to play them well, you can create magic. So this command we see in Cicero's speech. And what he did was the legal matter was solved within a few paragraphs, like 8 paragraphs. So it's not a very long speech, but almost double the attention was given on the importance of literature. That is why that speech is very important. And because he was such a master of his craft, of lawyering, of advocacy, that he didn't need much time to defend Archias. And he won the case ultimately. But the bigger thing that he achieved is that we are talking about him today. And we are not alone. The world is aware of him. And another interesting thing is this gentleman never attended a school. Forget about a law school. Perhaps schools were not there by then. And law schools were not invented, thought of, heard of. And perhaps even the word law was not there. The concept must have been there. It was there. He defended the matter in front of a judge in a court. But the important thing is that what was there in that speech. One is the skill, the art, sorry. And the second important thing is what he said about literature, his vision about literature and law. So that is the beginning, and it is not a new thing which we are talking about today. Thousands of years ago also, people were very clear about it. Another thing that I would like to emphasize upon is that law is not divorced, it is not separated from literature, from language, from humanities. Rather, they have a common origin, or perhaps we can even look at it this way that law grew out of humanities. So, first thing which I would recommend is this word, negative word should be discarded in law schools, like law, non-law. What is non-law? It is, first of all, the vision is that we have a single mass of learning. Knowledge is one. Using a negative word creates a negativity ab initio in the minds of the learners, in the minds of the researchers, everywhere. Because we have to look at law from a broader perspective, from the perspective of justice. And this can be achieved only if we are connected, not disconnected. It is not just a technical course. It is a technical course, of course, but in the course of your education, what you have to learn is the wholeness of it. That brings me to Tagore, his experiments with education in Shantiniketan. And I hope some people are there, or everyone has it been so terribly boring that everyone has dozed off, or what?
No, sir, we
No, not at all, sir. We are all here. We're all
we
here.
are all
Please.
ears to you, sir.
And
I
enraptured
am
by your talk.
I am extremely sorry. I am just a teacher. I talk to walls.
Same fraternity, sir. We are all teachers. We are all listening to you, sir. Please.
So that is my weakness. I can't be a great YouTuber because they are here to sit in front of the camera and just speak. It's always nice if I get some feedback, if some people ask something. Okay, anyway. So if some people can keep their cameras on, maybe I will get the illusion that a lot of people, there are a lot of people I can see, 163. Okay, so I was telling about the holistic approach of humanities. We are dealing with learning as such. I was talking about Tagore. He has talked about this division of knowledge and division of the individual. Why study of within inverted commas, let me use this word, non-law is very important, which includes social sciences and humanities. It is important because, first of all, law is nothing in isolation. Like literature is nothing in isolation. Nothing is complete in isolation. Everything is complete in its holistic sense. And since, and this example was very interesting, Cicero's example, he was a person who was trained by a poet, Archias. And he has himself mentioned all this in that defense speech, that how the study of literature helped him to be a good advocate. For being a good advocate, you certainly need a good command over language and an understanding of the literature. So let me say a few more things. Then coming back to Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, what he has hinted at, I think it is useful for all of us. If we have a lopsided education, it is like a shot of vitamins or steroids. If such shots are given to a person, perhaps for a few days, that person may thrive, may even look healthy. I think we have this gym culture these days, and substance abuse, I will call, culture of steroids. So everyone knows about it. What happens? Lopsided nourishment is provided, and the outcome is like failure of organs, like kidney failure, and the failure of the overall metabolic system. Likewise, if we as students, we have a responsibility to learn. If we become passive, if we think that teachers are there to teach us, somehow they can teach us, it is impossible. Again, going back to the gym, if you pay the gym, you may get the best of trainers, but if you don't move your limbs, if you don't exercise, nothing will happen. You have to build your body. Likewise, you have to build your education. You have to educate yourself. So you must be aware not to take only one type of nourishment. Let it be a complete nourishment. This word has been used by Tagore also in his experiences of the school as a student and as a teacher, as someone who founded Shantini. There are a lot of examples in front of us. If we look at all the famous lawyers, we should look at them. And some of the very famous lawyers are all around us, and they have been there in the history. I mentioned one or two already. But if you look at Gandhiji, I think you might be aware, most of you must be aware, that he was an advocate. He was a barrister. Now the distinction in India is not there, barrister and pleader and this and that. We only have advocates. So we can learn from their lives, and the contemporary advocates are there. Of course, there are classicals like Lord Denning, Justice Krishna Iyer, etc., etc. Cardozo is there. So what we see from their lives is that if you have tried to explore what type of persons they were, if you have tried to emulate them, if you have tried to become like them, you would all notice immediately that they all had exemplary command over language, and they had the famous lawyers. Am I right or wrong? Maybe you can give it in the comments. Okay. Yeah. Someone wants me to be a bit louder. Okay. So command over language, as Lord Denning has also written, this is the title of his work, that is essential in the profession of law. I will give you another example. We know about Gandhiji. Many of you must have read the autobiography of Gandhiji. And if you haven't, you must read. He was an advocate, and he has described in his autobiography in some detail his experiences as a student of law, and also his practice, which can be very important and enlightening for all of us. So Gandhiji studied in London, all of us know. It was one of the best law schools or the best law school in the world at that point. You are in a very good law school yourselves. You are in NLU. So the education that Gandhiji obtained is almost beyond question. That was the best possible education. And that education created many famous advocates. But if you have heard about his practice in India, like what he did in India as an advocate, you would be startled. He spent 6 months in India to try to establish his legal practice in Bombay. There were many experiences that he has described, but let me come directly to his first case. After a long struggle, he got the case of one Mami Bai, and he charged a fee of rupees 35 for that, which was a decent amount. The case was very simple. And when he went to the court to represent this lady, he was not able to speak anything. He did not utter much. He was not even able to stand. Perhaps he fainted in the courtroom. Now, someone who was educated in one of the best or the best law school in the universe, just to exaggerate, I am saying universe. Obviously, I don't expect there are other law schools in the universe. So, do we expect this outcome from such a person? What could have been the reason? I think the reason was that he was not able to communicate. His skills of communication were not honed. His tools of expression were not sharp enough. So that was the outcome, and he decided not to contest or not to plead for anyone in India again. He has also written in his autobiography that it was out of sheer necessity, not out of some great sense of righteousness, because he says that no one would have entrusted any case to me after this fiasco in the court. After that, he practiced for 20 years in South Africa. And there, that is very interesting for you to read what all happened there, what were his experiences. So that is what literature can give you, insights into the experiences of the famous people, famous lawyers, and what we can learn from them. The most important thing you can learn from the experiences of Gandhiji as a lawyer, as an advocate, is that he tried to maintain the integrity. I will give you one sutra or mantra, that is that an advocate is an officer of the court, and the role of an advocate is to uphold justice, to aid the court in providing justice. It is not just as a servant or as a paid employee of the client. So this important thing Gandhiji practiced. He even refused to take cases, but generally it is the duty of an advocate to represent a person, and whether you know that that is a person who has committed a wrong, because even people who have committed a wrong, committed a crime, they have rights. The human rights remain there. And one of the important rights is that they must be represented. And I think that if we look back at literature, we will see that how these things evolve. For example, if you look at Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, you would see that there was a trial. There is a courtroom scene there. And in that trial, Shylock, who is projected as evil as someone who deserves no mercy, we see that this person was not represented by an advocate at all. And what were the outcomes? Now, in the school, all of us must have read this story, heard of this. The outcome is that we end up believing that great justice was done. But I think it was one of the gravest injustices that was committed in the courtroom. It was violation of human rights. It was uh, there were communal and racist remarks in the open court, and there was a total fraud going on in the court. I wonder, as students of law, if you have examined it this way, it was fraud ab initio. I am not defending Shylock. He committed one mistake, and that mistake was legal or illegal. That is another matter. The mistake was a human weakness. That human weakness was that he was not able to forgive. Rather, he wanted to destroy his enemy. Destroying our enemy does not make us humans. And there is a talk of Christian quality of mercy, but whether that mercy was shown or not, that we have to see. Then, if you look at that case, you would realize that there is a difference, distinction now between attempt to murder and murder. But at that point, it wasn't there. Perhaps by this very work, this is a matter of research, this concept has arisen, and now it is in their different jurisdictions, jurisprudences. This concept is very much there, that attempt to murder is different from murder. So I think I will stop at this point. I don't really know at what time, how much time is remaining or not remaining, but if you say something, that will be really nice to ask things.
That was very interesting, sir. Before we open the house for further questions, I think, Professor Prasanshu, you have initiated the idea of word and worlds through literary text, a number of literary texts and literary writers, that it's going to be quite a task to weave them all together. You are absolutely right when you were talking about that students need to have command over language if they want to have command over law. I think as teachers of literature to law students and language teachers to law students, we've all experienced that nothing is more dramatic, nothing is more attractive than bringing into the class a text which talks about human complex situations. Because law and literature are essentially dealing with stories, stories that are representing our social, cultural, legal paradigms. So, yes, and I think one of the most beautiful things of teaching literature to law students is where law tells you that there is no space for any ambivalence, any ambiguity. Literature introduces the polarity of these within our living context. Law makes no space for any ambiguity, any ambivalence. But when you look at George Orwell's works or Premchand's Godan, Kuli, or Manto's stories for that matter, you talked about Merchant of Venice, but you bring in Antigone, the idea of human law and divine law, the conflict, the rights of the dead. So yes, I think it opens the words to the world of ambivalence and ambiguity. Also, when you were talking about how there are so many dimensions of truth, I feel that when we are talking to children in the class about linguistics like semantics and pragmatics, and I keep referring back to Michel Foucault in the class, when in your order of things he talks about that we are still debating whether it is the utterance that defines the truth, or the truth is already present in the cultural context which situates the utterance where it is. So yes, we cannot stress it enough, we cannot underline it enough, that command over language, understanding of these stories of human conflict, of human complexities, helps us to do better at understanding law. Interpretation is one aspect of it, but being, like you said, humanely open to the idea of so many different voices talking to us through literature. And thank you so much. It was a pleasure listening to you, sir. And the only reason why my camera was getting switched off time and again was because my phone is running low on battery. So the charging point is somewhere further away from where I'm sitting. And we now open the house to the questions. Anyone at all, please.
Now open to questions.
Nama, do you have any messages that probably students had sent before?
Yes.
I do see Jerry posing a question.
He can switch on his video, please. Javier, you can switch on your video, unmute yourself and ask your question. Similarly, the rest may also, they can raise their hands and switch on their videos and ask the question to sir.
I'll read the question if Mr. Javeer is unable to unmute. The question is, what does the language policy in the new education policy 2020 mean for linguistic justice? Can the IT cell please unmute him?
Interpret, sir, can you just unmute Javier? He is unable to unmute.
Yes, ma'am, wait. Yes, ma'am, wait. Yes, Javier,
Or
please.
Nama, you can...
Javier, please.
Okay.
Hello, am I audible?
Am I audible?
Yes, Javier, you're audible.
Thank you, sir, for
Thank you,
your
sir, for
thought-provoking and
thought-provoking and
educational
educational talk.
And as
As
you may have read in the chat box, the question was about the new education
new
policy.
education policy.
David, you have two systems on echoing, so please.
Javier, you have not two from two user account. Your one account.
One, yeah, that will help.
Hello, Javier.
Yes, sir.
Now you can speak.
Yes, sir. So, what does the language policy in the NEP 2020 mean for linguistic justice? This was my question.
Wonderful question. Basically, it talks about mother tongues and linguistic justice. First of all, I wonder how you perceive it. But see, linguistic justice I see as a part of the constitutional or the preamble's social justice. Social justice is an umbrella term which is given in the preamble. And how to define it? What is social justice? That must include linguistic justice also, because it is about a linguistic community. If I am not allowed to speak my language, my mother tongue, then I am ab initio disadvantaged. Suppose whatever your mother tongue is, you are born in a city or in your own city, town, or state. If that language has become a minority language or a low prestige language, then what will happen? No one in the school will speak that language, and a lot of interaction will take place, lot of instruction, lot of teaching will take place in that language. You will start missing out and you will be labeled as dumb or someone less brilliant, or people from your community as less brilliant. This is what happens with millions of people across the world, because we have a unique type of system in India, that is linguistic states. But even then, within every state, we have around 1600 languages. There are hundreds of languages in every state. How many state languages are there? One or two. And how many languages are practiced in the core? Just one or two languages. All right, so other people have a basic inherent disadvantage. So bridging this gap means bringing about linguistic justice. Have I answered this? And NEP is talking about emphasis on mother tongues. So this way it answers your question, if you are satisfied with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
If anyone else has any questions, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, sir. Am I audible? Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that enlightening session, sir. So my question here is that do you think that the kind of language that we use in our courtrooms or the legal language, is it an impediment for the illiterate people who seek justice in India? The illiterate people, of course, no language can be be used to make the process easier for them. So do you think this is like an impediment, or can we have a solution to this?
There are two or three things that you've asked. One is it's an impediment. Yes, it is, without any doubt. And another thing you said, for illiterate people, I would say even for literate people, even for people who know the language, like even English teachers or Hindi teachers or Punjabi teachers, it is impediment for them also. Why? Because legal language is slightly different from ordinary language. There is nothing wrong with it. But if you use it in a way to create hurdles, which is often done, then it is a scam, scandal, unfair means, whatever you call it. You must have seen in your cell phones, there are legal agreements to everything. You download an app and they ask you for your soul and for everything in the world, your privacy, your all the rights. They can hear you anytime, at day or night, at home or outside. They can record you. You have given all the permissions. You have suppose 100 apps in your phone. Perhaps 20 or 30 people have the rights to do everything. But have you ever read it? What they have said, what they have asked for, read it. It will be eye-opening. You already know. You already know that what are the things they can do. So how it is achieved? Some wonderful lawyer, corporate lawyer, sits and drafts that, and then it is presented in such fine print that no one can have the patience, even a person like me. Even I don't read everything. Maybe I attempted reading one or two. Then some of my students, they also did a wonderful thing. We took up a project called Simple EULA. We have a website you can see. So what we do is we look at these agreements and we put them in simple language so that people can understand. It is not a very big project, but we have been running it for several years now, 5-6 years. So some agreements are there, some contracts are there. Coming to how to solve it, there can be legislation. There is a whole movement called Plain English Movement. We don't have it, sadly. Not in a very visible way. Although in NLU Delhi, we talk about it very prominently, consciously. But I don't know if the courts are also conscious of it. Our endeavor is to take this even to the courts, to the professionals. And the simplest way for a teacher is to talk to the students. I'm talking to you now, wherever you go, this idea will go with you. So I hope that a time will come when all the teachers, all the colleagues of law, of literature, or different things talk to their students about this concept of injustice, which is inherent, inbuilt, hidden, and packaged word to the litigants. Litigant is the end user of language, of the law. And if we design that language in a way that the litigant is not able to break the shackles or locks of meaning, then it is a bit of it is inadvertent because of your educational status, educational level. That may be one thing, but a lot of it is advertent, as I just demonstrated.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
The next question is from Antas Prakash Singh. Can you unmute yourself and please ask your question?
Also shared in the chat my email and my website's link, so that if you have any question, you can follow it up. You can just contact me. Yes.
Antas, you can ask your question. You have again muted yourself. Please unmute and then ask question.
I'm so sorry, sir. Good morning,
One
sir.
thing I must say, Antas, before you say, let me compliment RE and UL. Such difficult questions have never been posed. I think they are really challenging questions, and let me just congratulate myself. Yes, I could say a few words on them.
My question to you is that we already know that English, whether in the form of literature or language, does not belong to the Indian subcontinent. English is only concentrated to elitist group and working class. So how long English, both in the form of literature and language, will take to be accepted as other popular language of the subcontinent, be it like Hindi, Punjabi or Bengali?
All right, gentlemen, thank you for bringing about this issue. Something very close to my heart. Let me answer it in several ways. One is, see, my mother tongue is Hindi. And I always tell my students, I have the right, I think that I have a right to teach English as a professor of English because I'm a writer of Hindi. And my Hindi is no worse than of my fellow writers. I also know a bit of Punjabi. And in fact, in Patiala, I am registered for a Punjabi course also in Punjabi University because my friend, the head of the department there, floated a course. He said, we want students. I said, I am the first one. I know a bit of it. Let me learn more of it. I know Bangla, a bit of Urdu. So it is, and perhaps a few more languages. The important thing, what I'm trying to answer is, we cannot force 130 million crore peoples. There is no need of forcing anyone. Bring about a change in yourself. Whatever your mother tongue is, do whatever you can do for it. Number one. And not because it's your duty, it may be, but because to become a complete person, not by wearing some big jam or something, or becoming a complete person, what you have to do is, you have to be connected with your roots. And language is the key to culture, to the roots, to your place. So you cannot ignore it. This must be done. And I think you asked some other things also. Please tell me what I have not answered.
Yes, sir. That English is only concentrated to elitist group and working class. So how long English, both in the form of literature and language, will take to be accepted as other popular language of the subcontinent?
How your question is about English, when English will be accepted?
Yes,
that's the question.
English literature, English both in form of literature and language, sir.
Oh, I thought it you have asked the other way around. Anyway, see, it already has a lot of acceptance and it has its own utility, certainly. But if we make it compete with our mother tongues, then we are doing something wrong. That is what I feel. But otherwise, English is serving a very useful purpose also. It is acting as a link language. We are able to communicate across languages, and also the very foundations of our nation may shake if we try to say that only one of our languages, because we have 1600 languages and a lot of official languages, 2-3 dozen official languages. So if we try to superimpose one language, then there would be problem. This purpose also is being served by English, because and English is also giving us or linking us with the world. So that is a utility. If we take it as a tool, and if we don't associate nationalism or otherwise with it, then it is very useful. And there is a lot of acceptance, no doubt. Government after government, state government after state government is saying that they are bringing it to the level of primary education, to lower education, etc. So that is a proof of acceptance. And why governments do it? Because of popular demand. It is not being superimposed. I think in Punjab also, I was there a few days ago. So I saw all the government boardings when Captain Amrinder Singh was there. I think he has also claimed that I have introduced English at primary level. Am I right? Madam, you are muted. Please unmute and say.
Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. And one of the major reasons for demand is because they believe that if your child is not fluent and proficient in English, the job market sort of shrinks for such a child, and therefore, and the state government is reflecting what the populist demands are actually. Yes.
State governments or any government cannot afford to go against the popular sentiment. Have I answered you, sir?
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
Nama, I just would like, Javeer, are you still there? You had one question regarding the forensic linguist's role in the
Yes,
court
ma'am.
proceedings.
Yes,
Javeer?
ma'am.
Sir, he
Yes,
has
ma'am.
asked a question, how do forensic linguists help in the court proceedings?
Well. It's too much to
Yes, sir,
ask.
this was my question.
This is not your question?
This was my question.
Okay, great. Thanks for putting your signatures to it. So my answer is, how much time do I have? 2-3 minutes? Okay. See, forensic linguist's role in what? In the courtroom. Okay. This is a very good question you
Yes, sir.
asked. The question is good for me because at the moment I am delivering a course called Forensic Linguistics in NLU Delhi. And perhaps I can send this offer to your university also, then you can also join. Now, what is forensic linguistics? There is a current case of the Mahant's suicide, and there is a suicide note. And by the way, I was invited by Zee Hindustan to testify as a forensic linguist to give some evidence, or I know these are technical terms, basically to give opinion. So I will tell you something because I spent a whole day in analyzing that suicide note. That will explain to you what it is about. See, in good old days, there used to be a document like this document. Okay. If there was a suicide, there used to be a document always, or ransom call or threat call. And what we used to do, I have some exposure to forensic science also. I studied it in Delhi University. We used to look at the paper, the texture of it, its microscopic, chemical, and different examinations. We also looked at the ink, the chemical composition of ink, then the typewriter or whatever it was used for writing, or the handwriting. But nowadays, a lot has changed. Like very often, even this Mahant's case is a slightly different thing where there is a paper. But I got a photocopy of that only to analyze. So basically I had to rely on the language and a bit on handwriting also. They are different things. Language and handwriting are different things. So from the language, I could decipher. Many experts on the TV have been saying that many people wrote it. There is a difference of ink. Difference of date is also there. But my linguistic analysis showed me that the author is the same. It appears to be the same. And secondly, the author also appears to suffer from a linguistic disorder. Appears, this is important. And as an expert of anything, any expert testimony, is not binding on the code. That's a very beautiful thing, very important thing. Why it is not a binding thing? Because we look only at one aspect. Again, I was talking about perspectives. We look only at one perspective of the truth. The whole of the investigation, then its overview must lie within the hands of a human being, the judge. So that is why it is not binding, but they may consider that evidence. First of all, whether it is admissible or not, generally it is admissible. Sometimes evidence is not even admissible, some types of evidence. So what we do is, in forensic linguistics, we look at language, its peculiarities, independent of the handwriting. And based upon that, we arrive at conclusions whether author is single, there are multiple authors, whether the author, what could be the educational qualifications of that author, what could be the region, many things, dialectology, idiosyncrasies, idiolects, they are different. So in a nutshell, this is what we do in forensic linguistics.
Thank you, sir, for explaining it with a recent example.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, even, this was the question which we got on the top. This was the first question that I got from the Google Forms, which students had collected. And I was really wondering, Javier, I hope sir has satisfied all your queries. And it's okay with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Aditi, you also had some question, and Shreya, you can just unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Am I audible?
Next time, I think when I talk, if and when, then I think I should just take the questions. That is the best thing. Yes, please go ahead.
Please, thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for this amazing session. So I was reading Jonathan Livingston Seagull yesterday, and I came across this concept of freedom. The book talks about that the only true law is that which leads to freedom, and law which impedes the development of an individual is law which should be changed because law responds to the society. So how do we see the convergence between law and literature here? And how can we bring forth these ideas put forth by literature into actual legal practice?
Of the tradition of a difficult question. It's too difficult for me to answer, but let me attempt. In terms of a generality, see, I perceive the world as the middle path. All realities are in the middle. Not realities. Realities are many, infinitely many. But how to live in this world? As an advocate, as an individual, everything can be done by treading the middle path. I am borrowing it from Gautam Buddha, not my saying. Don't go and erect a temple for me. So freedom is a very important keyword, and in law, in real life, everywhere, the freedom of the individual and survival of the society. Two things are the extremes. And what we do, and what is the evolution of jurisprudence is, we keep negotiating this middle point where we are here, slightly here. So nowadays, like earlier it was everyone's business. What you do in the village, everyone kept an eye on you, what you're doing. But now a lot of things are coming in the domain of individuals, choice, right, freedom, etc., etc. So this negotiation is ongoing. There is no absolute answer. There will never be an absolute answer. People in the profession of law will remain because they have to keep negotiating the middle point for the society, on behalf of the society, for the individual, for the betterment of the individual.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any more questions? Looks like you finally answered all their queries.
All the questions. Yes, looks like.
Hello, ma'am. Hi, this is Sachin here.
Yes, sir.
Sachin, go right ahead.
Yeah, I chatted, like posted my question. Not a question, I just want a kind of reflection. So, sir, how do you see the role of silence? Because I again feel that the silence is one of the strongest mode of communication. And I'm coming from the disability jurisprudence because there we feel or face the kind of a language barrier. And the way I read Derrida, that how language become a barrier, that it stops you from really talking about that the inner and the outer perspective. So there I talked about the word to know the inner word, in that sense that word has its own consciousness, and the speaker or the participant has that sensitivity towards it. So then, but when it became a politics, because when it came out and then we started giving our own expressions to it, and then we somewhere lose the games where it became something different. So yeah, kindly sir, what's your take on this?
It was really nice listening to you. Can you please do me a favor? Just ask the question in a single straight sentence.
Yeah, single form is this only. That's what I tried pointing out in chat box, that what is your take on the role of silence? So how do you see the silence as a mode of communication?
All right. Now it is much more comprehensible for me. See, when we study the field of communication, in communication, there are three modes of communicating: verbal, non-verbal, paralinguistic. Verbal is only 7% according to Mehrabian, but I have a take on that. Maybe someday we can talk on that. Rest 38% and 55% is paralinguistic and non-verbal. So if we look at paralinguistic, 38%. Within paralinguistic communication, there are several things, including volume, frequency, pitch, intonation, fluency, non-fluency, pauses. Now this pauses is about silence. Silence or the pauses in between are a means of communication. First thing I would like to note. Second, I know that your question is like the tip of the iceberg. I can see that there is an iceberg there. Perhaps I am not able to realize how big the iceberg is. But certainly if under disability jurisprudence, it is a challenge which has to be faced. But when we are talking of jurisprudence, the challenge should not be faced by someone who suffers a disability, but the challenge must be faced together by the society. That is the whole purpose of creating a society. That is the purpose of being together. And that is the purpose of even thinking of jurisprudence. Right? Yeah.
Sir, could I please add to that?
Madam, please. You are the organizer, yes.
No, but the question was aimed for you actually. So, in a world which is using words to construct its own realities and worlds, I think the polemic that you're trying to draw between silence and word is, for me at least, it's negative is a very strong word, but it is right. It's not right. I believe where you are wanting recognition, silence is marginalization. Silence is subaltern. That's how I link to it. If you are not being looked at, if you're not being heard, that is putting you outside the margin of the mainstream. So I don't think silence in the world, which is creating its own reality every day, I would not agree that silence is a form of communication. The world needs to hear every story, every experience, so that it can bring in the ideas, policies, rules, and of course laws to talk about what has not been talked about so far. At least that's how I feel, Sachin.
You are certainly right, but silence has a granular structure. Silence is not amorphous. It is made up of many things. Like silence may be forced, like a rape victim may be forced into silence. Then this applies what you are saying. That force may be by physical force, societal force, by uh, a whole spectrum of things which we can explore. But there can be an empowered silence also, like even to show your dominance. We maintain silence at times. So who is initiating this silence? Whether it is coming from inside or it is coming from outside. It is forced or it is voluntary. Silence can communicate many things, like silent agreement. You are agreeing silently. Silence is communication. It's a powerful means of communication. But silence is not a unitary thing. It is made up of many parts. We could think of only 3 or 4, but if we have invite everyone here, perhaps they will be able to give us according to Derrida only, like there are someone mentioned. Maybe hundreds of silences can be listed even in this session if we convert it into a session on silence, workshop on silence.
So the only thing is that when he talked about the disability jurisprudence and that sort of, that's the area that I started looking at it. That's how I read or heard his question, so to speak.
That I answered that disability jurisprudence is a very different thing, and the society's very purpose is to not let it remain an individual's disability or an individual's challenge. That is the only purpose of civilization.
Absolutely.
That challenges don't remain individual. That is also about criminal law. The theory of criminal law I am extending to this point. Criminal law talks about crime against the state. So I am saying something new. I am saying challenge against the state.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for adding. That has enriched my perspective, certainly.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been an insightful talk, and I think the interactive session has been more insightful. And we hope that we actually, the young curious minds, they had several questions, and to great satisfaction of theirs, you have already answered that. I appreciate the middle path, the things that you were talking about. And yes, definitely, silence speaks louder than the words. Silence, I think, is the word, words that they are taking form. So I really would like to thank you, sir, for taking time out and discussing, interacting with our students. And I also thank the chair for the session, Dr. Tanya Mandir. And thank you, Dr. Sachin, for your questions and triggering another thoughts and another session on silence, right? So, sir, now like this already, from the last 3-4 years, we had been contemplating upon this, but probably it had to happen in a scene like this when we get technologically connected. Right. So this digital connection had to make that possible. Thank you so much, sir, for your intellectual talk, and you have inspired our students to strengthen their reading skills and also work upon their spoken skills as well. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. It was a wonderful being associated. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for this session. Now I would like to call Dr. Professor Nibir Ghosh, and he will be speaking on the subject today, why literature matters in the study and practice of law. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to the distinguished guest.
Dr. Professor Prasanshu, Dr. Navdeen, Dr. Tanya, Raghav Arora, Pranit Singh, Namaha Bose, faculty members, RGNUL, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend my greetings on behalf of Remarkings to Professor Prasanshu for highlighting a very important dimension which could be of great interest to students. I greet you on behalf of Remarkings, and since we are the co-host, I also thank you from the core of my heart. It was wonderful listening to you. Well, as Nama said, what I'm supposed to be talking about is why literature matters in the study and practice of law. Friends, in a digitalized setting we are in, it is somewhat eerie, that you cannot see all the participants listening to you, and you almost have a feeling of Orwellian Big Brother watching you. So I extend my greetings on behalf of Remarkings to all the young participants who are by default big brothers watching what the others are doing. Well, friends, to begin with what I'm trying to share with you, I'm not delivering any talk as such. I would like to share my experiences with you as a teacher, writer, scholar, editor, someone who has seen how the courts function, how the judges function, how the advocates work. I would like to begin with two quotes of W.H. Auden, one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. One statement he makes in Disillusionment in 1939. He says, poetry makes nothing happen. If we keep that in mind, we will say that any discussion of any connectivity of literature becomes redundant. Another quote which I'm going to use is where Auden says, you cannot tell people what to do. Because Dr. Navdeen had mentioned in the inaugural, that what we say is going to inspire people. So I've come with no words of inspiration as such. What Auden says is, you cannot tell people what to do. You can only tell them parables. And that is what art really is. And what is art? Particular stories of particular people and experiences from which each according to his immediate and peculiar needs may draw his own conclusions. So what I'm going to share with you is a collage of impressions. And you have to draw your own conclusions. I'm not going to move on a straight track. When we talk about the RGNUL or all the institutes that are catering to law, what the first thought that comes to my mind is that law itself is a very challenging profession, the legal profession, because you have the complexity. Even when you look at the deity of justice, the deity of justice, who was represented as Themis in ancient Greek, she is blindfolded. Justice is blindfolded, holding a pair of scales in one hand and a sword in the other, which ideally represents that blindness represents fairness and impartiality, as well as the gift of prophecy. This is idealism. And what is reality? You see an Amitabh Bachchan movie like Andha Kanun, and you have a different interpretation of the blindfolded deity of justice. I will now share a quote, and I will tell you the author after I'm done with the quote. This statement says the lawyers will, as a rule, advance quarrels instead of repressing them. It is within my knowledge that they are glad when men have disputes. Petty pleaders actually manufacture them. Their touts, like so many leeches, suck the blood of the poor people. Friends, I'll now disclose the name from whom the quote comes. It is Mahatma Gandhi writing in Hind Swaraj. And you know where Gandhi is concerned. He himself said that when I was taking up the profession of law in the Delhi court, I often heard that a lawyer's profession is a liar's profession. So in the midst of all these complexities, the challenges that the profession as such offers in a free country, in a free democratic country, justice is available to everyone. But in order to go for justice, the kind of impediments that you have to face is you feel that it is better to go the way of Karl Marx, who said, religion is the opium of the masses. You just go and pray that may somebody who has eyes see what is going on. My first emphasis will be why literature matters. I'm not trying to advocate that all of you, will transform your lives if you read literature. Nothing of that sort. Initially, even now, I think we are up against a wall of resistance if by choice, as an adolescent, we start talking about I love literature and I was to take up literature as a profession. The chances are you may be thrown out of your house. That's what you're talking about. If you are not an engineer or a doctor or anything of that sort, and obviously recently, I think maybe 10 years or so, that even legal profession has probably gained importance. So what I'm going to emphasize on is why literature matters. And for this, I will be taking up several parables. The first parable that I would like to share with you is a story, Hindi story written in Hindi. The author is Sudarshan. Many of you in your schools may have read it, but I would like to share the story nevertheless. In this story, there are two main characters. One character is the saint who is known as Baba Bharti. And another character, prominent character, is a dacoit by the name of Jagat Singh. Now these two know each other. And the third character, not in human form, is a horse called Sultan, who belongs to the saint Baba Bharti. Baba Bharti loves his horse, which is exceptionally a kind of a great horse, loves the horse like his own kith and kin and son. Now, in this story, what happens? One day, This dacoit learns about the greatness of Sultan, and he says that I am so powerful, nothing moves in this area without my wish. I must possess this horse. So he goes to Baba Bharti and says that I want to take this horse, I want to buy this horse. And Baba Bharti tells him that I love this horse like my little son, and I can part with anything in the world, but I cannot part with Sultan. He pleads and goes away. One day, this Baba Bharti, riding on Sultan, is going at top speed and enjoying the beauty of nature. Now, what happens? While the horse is in motion, he suddenly hears a very pathetic cry. And that pathetic cry tells him that, he finds that beneath a tree, there is a person who is in tatters, very poor and shabby looking, who seems to be absolutely sick and invalid, physically challenged. And he hears the other person say, Baba, रुक जाओ, मुझे 3 मील दूर गांव तक जाना है, मुझे ले चलो, नहीं तो मेरे प्राण यहीं खत्म हो जाएंगे. Baba Bharti gets down from the horse and makes this man sit on the horse. And the moment he sits on the horse, he sees a great jerk. And then he sees that that man whom he had mistaken for a poor, sick person is no one else but Khadak Singh. And when he sees that it is Khadak Singh, he is a little surprised at first. I wish to share a part of that conversation that takes place between the two. So this man, he gets up on the horse and he is about to ride away with the horse. And this he tells. And Khadak Singh is about to move when Baba Bharti says, "Thodi der ke liye ruk jao." This man stops and Khadak Singh says, कि मैं ये घोड़ा नहीं दूंगा तुमको, इस घोड़े के अलावा जो भी मांगो तुम्हारा है. इस घोड़े की बात मैं नहीं कर रहा, लेकिन मेरी एक विनती सुनते जाओ. And he thought maybe he has something up his sleeves and he says, ठीक है कहो. What Baba Bharti tells Khadak Singh is, मेरी प्रार्थना केवल ये है कि इस घटना को किसी के सामने प्रकट ना करना. This man, Khadak Singh, who thinks that he has to run away as fast as he can with the horse, he sees the owner is telling him that instead of his reporting this matter to everyone, he says, don't mention this matter to anyone. And he focuses his full attention on Baba Bharti's face. And he says, Baba ji, इसमें आपको क्या डर है? सुनकर बाबा भारती ने उत्तर दिया, लोगों को यदि इस घटना का पता चले तो वो दीन दुखियों पर विश्वास करना बंद कर देंगे. I'm reading a passage which follows this conversation. बाबा भारती चले गए, परंतु उनके शब्द खड़क सिंह के कानों में उसी प्रकार गूंज रहे थे. सोचता था, कैसे ऊंचे विचार हैं, कैसा पवित्र भाव है. उन्हें इस घोड़े से प्रेम था. इसे देखकर उनका मुंह फूल की तरह खिल जाता था. कहते थे, इसके बिना मैं रह ना सकूंगा. इसकी रखवाली में वो कई रात सोए नहीं. भजन भक्ति ना कर रखवाली करते रहे. परंतु आज उनके मुख पर दुख की रेखा तक दिखाई न पड़ती। उन्हें केवल ये ख्याल आया, कहीं लोग दीन दुखियों पर विश्वास करना ना छोड़ दें। ऐसा मनुष्य मनुष्य नहीं देता। This is, I'm not taking you to the end of the story. If you're interested, when you read the story, you will see what a powerful ending it is. This is why literature matters. It changes, it can change the mind of a saint as well as the mind of a decor. The second parable which I wish to share with you while emphasizing the power of literature, I will take you back to almost 2 centuries. The first quarter of the 18th century. I wish to share with you the experience of a slave boy who was named Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass is a name which, even if you Google, you will know that it is a great story of a slave who became free. This Frederick Douglass, when he was an 8-year-old boy, he was with a family of owls, and the wife of the couple, the wife and the couple, encouraged Frederick Douglass to take interest in reading. Douglass began to find a lot of joy in being encouraged by this lady, Sophia, to read. But then one day, he sees that her husband comes in and says that, what the hell are you doing? You're teaching a nigger to read? The moment he reads, he will want to be free and you will lose it. And this wife suddenly realizes that what her husband is saying is right. And then she stops guiding him. But this 8-year-old boy has heard that education, reading, can make him free. And from that moment, it becomes a passion with this boy who is seeing brutality all around. And then what he feels that he must write, he must read, he must learn to read and write. And what does he do? He goes out, when he goes out, though he's with a white family, all around, there are a lot of white families around. And when he goes out to meet with the boys of his age, he finds that those boys are all going to school, and mostly they talk about a particular book. They said, oh, I read this book today. Oh, this is fantastic. And then he says that. So this boy, who's a slave boy, he feels a kind of a desperate attachment to own that book. And you know what he does? For 1 month, he polishes the boots of the white men so that he can save money and buy this book. And because he was working with a family where food was in plenty, so he would carry bread in his pocket, he would carry some eatables in his pocket, he would give to those boys who would probably in exchange tell him something, teach him something, and he begins to own that book. And what I wish you to notice, the title of the book is called The Columbian Orator, written by Caleb Bingham in the year 1870. And you know what it says? In that book, I prefer to be true to myself. Even that slave boy says that he wants to be true to myself. even at the hazard of incurring the ridicule of others, rather than to be false and incur my own abhorrence. From my earliest recollection, I did the entertainment of a deep conviction that slavery would not always be able to hold me within its foul embrace. Another point which I want to share over here, which probably I don't want you to miss this point, that this boy is desperate to read because he has found a goal for himself, and that goal is freedom. And he knows that these words would be the bridge which would take him to the goal of freedom. And then what he does, he looks at, he says that my copybook was the board fence, brick wall, pavement, and my pen and ink was a lump of chalk. When he goes to the Columbian orator, what attracts him most is that there is a kind of essay where there is a dialogue between a slave master and a slave. This boy reads that and he sees that there is an argument, there is a debate in this kind of an essay where the slave owner tells him that you have run away thrice and I have caught you thrice. Now I want to leave you and all that, and there is a debate. And ultimately, at the end of the debate, the slave owner is convinced that this man deserves his freedom, and he gives him his freedom. So this idea gets into him. And apart from that, I think if you read the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, you will see the kind of the pieces in the Columbian orator which influenced him. And he was so influenced, and you see what happened. In 1833, Frederick Douglass wins his freedom. But that is not the story, that a slave boy becomes free. He becomes one of the greatest abolitionists in there. And since those days you didn't have those WhatsApp and Facebook circulating, he would run wherever he could, and wherever he saw a gathering, he would get there and he would speak in such eloquent words that people simply, black and white, both of them were transfixed, and they would sit and listen to him, and they would just wonder that is it true that you could have a genius like him who has just been freed from slavery without a teacher, without a school, without anything for that matter. Literature, as I said, that if you don't have a goal, reading literature can be just reading stories. The third example I wish to share with you is of a great writer whom I had the chance to meet at Seattle during my Fulbright year in the US. And when I call him a great writer because he's the winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes. His name is August Wilson. And when I was actually thinking of August Wilson, I have read at many places that he does not grant interview to anyone. He is a kind of a recluse, stays within himself and doesn't probably talk to many people. I told a friend of mine, who's again a very big name in African American literature, Charles Johnson, that is there any possibility that we could, I and my wife could just come and meet August Wilson? And you won't believe, and this is again, the chance does play its role. And it wasn't even a week when I got a call from Charles Johnson, and he said that you'll be happy to know that August Wilson has invited you both to dinner at Capitol Hill today. We went. I had read quite a good deal about him, and then we got into talking. I thought since we were his guests at dinner, I should not start asking him a question in the form of an interview, but I asked him that, August, that you are a great name today. What actually inspired you to come to writing? And August said that I was very fond of reading. I had a library card when I was 4-year-old. And I started going to a library at the age of 6. But then he recounted a story. He said, I was 14-year-old and I was studying in school. We were given an assignment in school where we were asked to write on any character of history who probably influenced the students. He said, I wrote my piece on Napoleon Bonaparte, and after 3 days, we submitted that essay. After reading that essay, because August Wilson is African American, though he looks white, the teacher called him and asked him in front of the whole class, you have to tell me who has written this essay for you. August said, it was my essay. I have cited all the references there, and you can check on anything. You ask me anything and I will respond to that. And you know ultimately what happened? The teacher said, if you accept that you have, this essay has been written by your sister or anyone else, or for that matter, I'll give you an A grade. But if you refuse to accept, I'll give you a D grade. August said, as a 14-year-old, I was thinking of all the dreams my mother had for me, because his father had left him when he was just 6-year-old, and it was his mother who brought him up. And he said that when I was given the chance to think it over, I simply took the papers from my teacher's hand, tore them up, threw it into the waste paper basket, and walked out of the school. And my education ended when I was just approaching 15, he says. But I knew my mother would be sad because she wanted to see me as a great lawyer fighting for the rights of African Americans. But I couldn't do anything about it. But from that day, for the entire duration of the school that I was supposed to be in, I would go to the Dale Carnegie Public Library and read till the library closed. And where Patiala is concerned, I have a monograph in the University of Patiala on August Wilson, on his piano lesson, and that is there. So August, when I talk of August, and you know what he said, I said, your mother must be feeling very sad that you left the school. He said, yes, for a little while she was sad, but then she got used to that idea. And today, I simply wish my mother would be alive to see that her son, August, has got 24 honorary doctorates from universities all over the US and Europe, including one from Hull. This is what literature can do. Now, the example that I'm going to give you, probably, according to me, in the context of today's this thing, is highly relevant. In Bombay, I'm going back again to 1 century. On the Lamington Road, there is a popular book depot. There was a popular book depot, which was established in 1924. The owner of that book was Ganesh Ramarao Bhatkar. And he would see that a student would come to his shop with great difficulty, take out some annas, that was the currency then, and buy one book and just stand there and stare at the rest of the book. This Ganesh Ramarao Bhatkal saw that this boy somehow had a passion for seeing all those books. And he told him that, come in, you can look at any book you like. And he started looking at the books, and he said that you can go home only when I close the shop, but listen, before closing the shop, I keep a part of the back door open for routine work to go on. You can stay and read whatever you feel like before we finally close. And what happened, the encouragement that he gave to this boy who joined first BA honors in literature and then did his MA in English literature. And you know what this boy states? It was in those years that I read the lines of Wordsworth, which have always been etched in my memory. And there are 3 lines from that poem, Tintin Abbey, lines written a few miles above Tintin Abbey, that is the title of the poem. He quotes 3 lines and says, that best portion of a good man's life. That best portion of a good man's life is little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. That is the best portion of a good man's life. Little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. And this boy, after completing his MA, he wanted to become an English teacher. And normally, when we see that people don't take to the subject very much, but